Hello, it's Mason Cozad, and this is my podcast for the Cheese and the Worms. Cheese and the Worms, in my opinion, was an interesting read, and going through it, taking the quizzes and getting more into depth into it, I realized it's not only just a history book that I have to get through and get a good grade on. This really dives into 1600 religion, um, what was going on with uh, politics or the hierarchy, the nobles, whatever you would call it, land control, military operation, and social relation too. The book was written by Carl Geisenberg, or Professor Geisenberg. The book is it's interesting because it shares kind of a unorthodox Roman Catholic society, mixed, obviously tied into the Middle Ages, which is the age of faith. But with all the evidence that we have to present day, it was only written by monks and priests. It was controlled by the people that were greedy of power, land, and riches. So it's hard to find out. It's hard to find out what the average everyday person was thinking and trying to understand. So what Professor Geisenberg does, he writes a piece of microhistory about a man named Minocchio, and he lived from 1532 to 1599, or 1600. He was a miller, who nearly spent all his life in Montreal, in a small town hill in Fruly, I think is how you pronounce it. Part of the Vitian Republic, if that's how you pronounce it. The occupation of a miller set Minocchio kind of apart from everybody else in the town because the mill was a place of social meeting. It was kind of like a bar, as we would relate it to present day. It's where people would exchange ideas and all this kind of stuff. So to be a miller in the 16th century, you kind of got a taste of a lot of culture and a lot of information. So in the 16th century, in that town, they kind of lived in a relatively free society in his village. It's kind of prevented from a lot of war and famine, all that, because it's tucked away in the mountains. And, Professor Geisenberg kind of drifts away from the background of the town and all this kind of, storytelling, and he really gets into depth about 1600 religion and 1600 land ownership and who was in power and who was trying to be greedy and take over all the land and wealth. And he kind of uses Minocchio as the victim or the protagonist, however you see it, but Minocchio pours out to his audience of, wild information that he's read over the 12 or 11 books that he mentioned on trial. Some he owned, others he borrowed. My dogs are barking. But the funny thing is, what sets Minocchio apart from most of the individuals in this town, and the reason why he was put on trial and the reason why he's such a voice, is because of the literature he read. Having this variety and this intellect, reading all these books, was not a normal thing in this time of century. Even nobles wouldn't have the information and intellect Minocchio had. He was culturally inclined with these books, reading the Quran and so forth. When the everyday citizen gets its information from priests and nobles, and at the same time, the nobles and priests are playing the double card, not only instilling into the everyday people that they have their back and this is the right way to live and you'll go to heaven, this and this if you do that, but they're taking unfair tax money away from them. They are making sure when they die that the next generation will be in control of the land. These are selfish people under the word of God. It's a sham. And Monocchio's intellect kind of puts them in a pickle because even though there's freedom of speech, and this is a relatively free society in this time, him speaking up against the church is the cardinal sin. It's as worse as they said in the book, as they quoted it, committing murder. So when Monocchio did this, obviously he got burned on the stake, and he died, and they instilled into the people that he was wrong. But I feel like some people perish for a reason, and some people, even if they die, they leave a mark for future generation. And that's why I want to get into the Reformation, because even though Monocchio was a piece of microhistory and he didn't necessarily impact the Reformation and all what was going on for freedom of religion and break away from this Roman Catholic control, he's one of the first signs of people being free and open-minded. That's just an idea. But let me get into the Reformation, some facts and information about the Protestant Reformation and all that. It was during the 16th century. It's political. It's religious and political. It kind of splintered in European Catholic culture. Northern Central Europe. A very important reformer would be Martin Luther, John Calvin. They questioned the Catholic Church's ability to define a holy Christian practice. They argued religious and political redistribution of power into the hands of the Bible, the pastors, the nobles, the princes. They didn't like how the faith triggered wars, executions. They didn't feel like, they finally were open-minded and they realized that how can you be sent to heaven for killing and doing things against God's will, but you're having someone holy tell you that it's okay and that if you do these things that you will be sent to heaven. Because keep in mind, these people, these everyday citizens in Italy, they look forward to life expectancy was low. I mean, it was not a high rate. You're not living that long. People looked forward to the afterlife. So when these nobles and priests, the people above them, they look up to for information and all this, they're telling them that you do these things, you'll be sent to heaven. That's what they're going to do. So this Protestant Reformation was kind of a split from that.